This is the oral presentation by Stacey Adams for the GEB 3213 Business Communication class. Introduction. In this presentation, we will be talking about what communication is, how we can effectively communicate, some directions and methods of communication, barriers, and how to overcome them to be able to communicate effectively in the real world. What is communication? Communication, according to our text, is the process of sending and receiving messages. This can be done through spoken or written words and non-verbally through facial expressions, gestures, and voice qualities. Basically, once someone sends a message to you and you receive it and respond accordingly, communication will have occurred. How do we effectively communicate? We communicate effectively using what is called the communication model. This model consists of the communication need, sender, message, audience, or response. Let's break each of those down real quick. Communication need. A communication need begins the process. A need is defined as a requirement, necessity, or obligation. So in terms of business, it is the what, where, when, and why. Sender. The sender is the person who creates the message. When preparing for the message to go out, they must take into account the culture or language they want to be used, whether that be formal or informal, legal constraints, and ethical circumstances. They then identify and analyze how they believe the audience should receive the message and adjust it accordingly, making sure the objectives are being met. Message. The message conveys the information based upon how the sender prepared it for delivery. Different mediums include staff or individual meetings, telephone or conference calls, video conference, podcast, or even less formally through the company grapevine. Audience. The audience is the receiver of the message. Their part is to filter the communication based on their position, experience, knowledge, and background, then provide feedback in the form of a response. The audience's response to the message then starts the cycle again as they pass along the message through directions of communication. Directions of communication. For organizations to communicate successfully, information flows through formal and informal channels. The formal communication network consists of 3 types of communication: downward, upward, and lateral. Downward communication is when the message is based from managers to their employees. Upward is the vice versa, meaning lower level employees provide feedback up the chain of command to management staff. Lateral communication is the cascading effect of peers spreading messages to one another. The informal communication network is a message being spread to and from sources outside of the organization through unofficial or third-party channels. Methods of communication: oral, written, body language. Barriers of communication. There are 2 types of communication barriers: verbal and nonverbal. Verbal barriers are related to what you write or say and include inadequate knowledge or vocabulary, differences in interpretation, language differences, inappropriate use of expressions, over-abstraction and ambiguity, and polarization. Nonverbal barriers relate to how you act and include inappropriate or conflicting signals, differences in perception, inappropriate emotions, and distractions. How to overcome these barriers. To overcome these barriers, we as leaders and communicators with others can be more mindful of our messages themselves, how we are delivering them, and how the receiver may hear it. Conclusion. Communication is important in every aspect of our daily lives, and once we understand how to communicate effectively, we can flourish in the world.